I'm so excited to bring to you Hillary Sheinbaum. I'm so excited. Hillary is a journalist, and she writes for the New York Times. Well and good. She is the author of the book, The Dry Challenge. If you have not seen her, like all over television, she's been on the Tamron Hall Show. I mean, Good Morning America, Today Show, hustled her way through everywhere you can possibly be. She's also the author of GoingDry.com, and she is a sober, curious woman. You've been in the sober, curious movement since 2017, correct?
Yeah.
So I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks for
today.
having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited. First of all, I have to try this drink. She brought this drink. It's called Curious Number One, Pomegranate Negroni.
Yeah.
That's how you say it.
Yeah, Negroni.
So this is a craft cocktail.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
by
so
Curious Elixirs.
So let's try this. Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. So this is a non-alcoholic.
Yep. And they're one of the OG brands.
This is delicious.
So good.
This is so good.
I'm obsessed.
So if you go out to a sober bar, is this what they are serving?
Well, now just any bar has a lot of non-alcoholic beverages. Yep. But I'm always the person who, when my friends are having people over, I'm bringing non-alcoholic cocktails or non-alcoholic bottle of wine or non-alcoholic spirits if, people are making their own drinks. And it's fun to show people and educate them about the space.
What's this one?
This one is a non-alcoholic raspberry gin.
Ooh.
So it's called Fluair. But it's cool because people like to compare and contrast, and you can show that there are really good non-alcoholic options. So
does it actually taste like gin?
Yeah, it has botanicals. So it has that taste. I wouldn't recommend taking it as a shot or drinking it straight.
Right, but if you put it in a cocktail, it'll have that gin kind of taste.
Exactly.
Okay. That's crazy because I have never had, I've had a mocktail before, but I've never had a mocktail with non-alcoholic liquor in it, which I know is out there.
Yeah. There are so many brands now. When I wrote the Dry Challenge and when I started my journey, there were 3 brands, one of them being Curious Elixirs. And now the space has just blown up. There are so many options. It's almost silly not to try them because they're just so good. There's some bad ones too.
Well, we won't
but there's some great ones.
Yeah. So let's talk about the book, right?
Yeah.
The Dry Challenge. Well, first let's talk about what inspired you to go sober curious in 2017, because I think that one is even a more important question.
It's a funny story. Mm-hmm. It was a complete accident.
Oh, okay. How do you completely accidentally go sober curious?
I just accidentally changed my life. So I'll set the scene for you. So 2016, I'm a freelance writer. I am doing red carpets for weekly magazines like In Touch and Life and Style. Mm-hmm. So I am starting my workday really at 5 p.m. and, attending these really fun, cool events. I'm interviewing, all the Kardashian Jenners, all the Real Housewives, Brad Pitt, Meryl Streep. I'm going to movie premieres. It is literally my dream job, right? Especially as a 20-something in New York.
Oh, yeah.
Getting to go to these amazing events was just so surreal. And interviewing people that I'd, watched on TV and movies for years.
Right.
So I'm doing these events, interviewing celebrities, going to the movie premieres, and then attending the after parties where there is top shelf liquor and, flowing champagne, and you're allowed to drink on the job.
Right.
And I took my job very seriously. So I'm not getting wasted.
Right.
Right. But if I want a glass of wine, I'll have one. So that's my night job. That's my consistent contract job. And then during the day, I'm writing about food and beverage, mostly alcohol, for Eater and USA Today and a local paper called AM New York. Mm-hmm. I'm interviewing bartenders. I'm learning about the latest trends. I'm, going to local bars and restaurants and inquiring about their beverage menus. And I'm doing, wine, beer, and spirit tastings on a regular basis. So needless to say, as you can imagine, and being a 20-something in New York and dating and hanging out with friends and, doing all the things, that alcohol was pretty prevalent in my life. And at the end of 2016, I went to dinner with my friend Alejandro, and we were just chit-chatting over sushi, and he asked me if I had any New Year's resolutions. And I said no, because I I still to this day don't really believe in them.
I'm the same way. I'm like, if I want to make a change, I'll just make the change, right? I don't need like a date to make the change,
or
right?
Do it tomorrow. Do it on Monday.
Right.
Like, do it in 5
why do I have
minutes.
to wait till January?
Exactly. So I was like, no. And he brought up this thing called Dry January, which had started in the UK and wasn't very popular in the US at the time. Yeah. So I kind of changed the subject. I was like super uncomfortable. And a week later, it was New Year's Eve. I was at a party and I was texting people who were not there and wishing them Happy New Year. So I texted Alejandro. I said, Happy New Year. And something came over me as I was tipsy. And I asked him if he wanted to make a bet. So this is what really started the dry challenge. He agreed, and we're both super stubborn. I'm an Aries. He doesn't like to lose. And he was like, totally, you're on. So long story short, we started the month dry, and Alejandro ended up losing. And so the premise was the loser of this bet had to buy the winner dinner anywhere in New York. Yeah. So
you're like, I write about food and beverage. I know the most expensive place.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. We went to dinner at Momofuku Co. and he paid the bill.
I don't even know what that is. Like, what is that?
Oh my gosh. So it recently closed. It was in the East Village.
Okay.
It was a tasting menu.
Like, are we talking like $5 bill kind of place?
The bill was over $800.
Oh my God.
So
sucker.
He got to enjoy the food too. But in the end, I ended up actually dedicating my book to him. So I say that we both won.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
Truthfully, that month was so, and I don't say this lightly, so life-changing because I learned so much about myself and also how alcohol was, you know, impacting me mentally and physically and all the things and socially. So it was well worth it.
Yeah.
And I wrote a book about it.
And you wrote a book about it. So it must have impacted you a lot to be, you know, still sitting here, you know, almost 7 years later, still sober curious.
Yeah. So I've done a dry January every year since. And I've done, you know, many other dry months and, you know, stretches of time in between. I'm just a really strong proponent for giving up alcohol, whether that be for, you know, a month or a weekend, and just seeing how it impacts you on a daily basis.
Right. One of the questions that we kind of got into before we started taping that I want to go back to is the difference between sober curious and sobriety, because there's a big gap with a lot of things in between. So when you say you're sober curious, that doesn't mean you're 100% sober all the time.
Correct.
Right?
So I still drink on occasion. I think that there is such a range now and there's so many labels and definitions. It's a really kind of like choose your own adventure in a way. I think, you know, on one end of the spectrum, there are individuals in recovery who cannot drink. It is, you know, a life or death scenario. And certainly I always say that my book is not for individuals who are seeking recovery programs. But, you know, there are people in recovery. There are people who are sober. There are people who are sober curious. There are people who are Cali sober.
Wait, what's Cali sober?
It means that you're not drinking, but you smoke. So there are just different things for different
Apparently
people.
I'm not like in the know.
There are just so many options. You can really define, you know, your relationship to alcohol however you choose.
I think a lot of teenagers are in that, I'll say, what is it?
Cali sober.
Cali sober. I have some teenagers and I've noticed that that's more of the trend right now than a lot of drinking parties.
Yeah.
They don't drink as much anymore as they used to. They're doing more of that kind of stuff. So you get sober curious, and you know, I've been through bouts of years of not drinking, and I just absolutely have enjoyed that time. You know, obviously having 4 kids, not drinking, even after my divorce, not drinking for very many years and enjoying that time of being sober, you know. I don't drink that much as it is these days, but what did you learn about yourself that you know, in that first month really made you want to stay there?
Like so much.
Yeah.
I mean, first and foremost, I thought that I was a terrible sleeper. I mean, living in New York can be stressful. Being a freelance writer also has its ups and downs.
Right.
And I thought that I just it was normal to sleep as little as I was. Like 5 hours a night was a good night of sleep for me. And I very quickly learned that alcohol was impacting the way that I was resting and recovering. And I went from 4 to 5 hours of sleep to 7 to 8. And so, sleep makes such a big difference when it comes to our mood and just like our productivity and our attitude and the things that we even consume, right? So that was a major one. But I always say like my skin was clearer and more glowy. I mean, I wasn't like losing weight because I was replacing a lot of those calories with ice cream. But I think I just in general felt more confident like saying no to things. And also like dating was like totally different. I feel like I could spot red flags easier. And certainly like if people weren't respecting my boundaries about alcohol, then it was kind of a no for me.
Yeah.
So that was major too.
Before I had kids, I was actually a drug and alcohol counselor. I don't think I told you that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I was a drug and alcohol counselor before I had kids. And we were talking in email about how my brother was an addict. And so I was always terrified of drugs and alcohol because I was like, is it in my family? Addiction and all of that. But when I was a drug and alcohol counselor, one of the things we talked about was addiction transference, right? And you just mentioned you didn't lose weight because of ice cream. And one of the things that we see a lot of times when people are giving up drinking is they replace it with something else, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you replace it with something good, which is like maybe working out. But if you're like an alcoholic and you replace it with something else, a lot of times you do it in an addictive mentality where you're like over working out and you suddenly are addicted to working out, or you're addicted to dating apps, or you're addicted to eating, or you're overeater, or you're undereater, or something like that. So I think that's kind of common when people give up one thing, like you're like ice cream.
Well, I think also because I was drinking cocktails and wine and had that sugar on a regular basis, I was suddenly craving sugar so much. And I loved ice cream to begin with. So that was already part of my diet. But I was definitely like, all right, well, I'm not drinking a 400 calorie margarita, so might as well have this like, half pint of ice cream. That's just, I was like, I'm not going to cut out dessert too. So
I'm giving up one thing. Jeez.
Yeah, one at a time.
One thing at a time.
One thing at a time.
So in your book, you talk about when people are giving up drinking. Like if somebody's sober curious and they're like, you know what, I'm going to give it a month. Let's say, I mean, we have dry January, we have sober October. A lot of people give it up for Mental Health Awareness Month. And so what are some things that you want to tell people as they're going into these months to prepare for that maybe you weren't prepared for, that you wish you would have known?
Oh, I definitely was not prepared. Making a spontaneous bet on New Year's Eve and then returning to your home to find bottles of wine is not ideal. But I would say there are a few things that I think are really helpful. One being, it's really important to have a support system. So I always say recruit a friend. I think that having my friend, even for the few weeks that he was still participating before he lost, it was really nice to, make plans and have somebody who understood the harsh reality that, alcohol is everywhere, but also could, cheer me on, and I could do the same for him. So having a friend to do it with is definitely something I recommend. I also think that opting for non-alcoholic beverages is really important. You can still go out and be social and enjoy, a dinner with a glass of non-alcoholic wine. So, like we were talking about, Curious Elixirs is a great non-alcoholic cocktail brand. Fluair is a great non-alcoholic spirit brand, as well as Damarack 00, which is a gin. And Free Spirits also makes non-alcoholic tequilas and bourbons and Milanos and a vermouth and a ton of other stuff. So I would definitely say explore those non-alcoholic options, because just because you're not drinking alcohol doesn't mean that you have to opt for water or a diet soda. And I also think it's really important to be kind to yourself. Alcohol is so prevalent no matter where you live. It is part of birthdays and celebrations like weddings. It is part of grieving. It is part of, sports games. It's part of going to the park and people will pull out a bottle of wine. It's part of dating. So I think it's just very eye-opening to see that once you pull back on your consumption to see like, wow, there are so many opportunities to drink, but I am opting out of that. So in the meantime, you know, if you do have one, you know, glass of wine or whatever it is during your dry month or dry period, it's okay. Just, you know, start again the next day or continue on with your journey. It doesn't mean that all is lost if you know, have one or two.
Right. I think what is interesting about what you just said about the dating piece, and I know you've done a lot of press around dry dating.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a single mom, I had many years where I was in the dating scene and I would always not drink, you know, during the first date because it would be very eye-opening, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
To seeing those red flags. Do you find that it was more difficult for you to go out there, or do you think it was a kind of a superpower?
A little of both. And at the same time, like, you can see a lot of green flags too. But I think definitely during that first year, it was really interesting to tell people that I wasn't drinking, and people would ask why. And funny enough, I think a lot of the time when I was just like, oh, I'm trying out a dry January, sometimes it wasn't like, quote unquote, like good enough of an explanation for them. But when I further explained that I had a bet going that I couldn't lose, they were more likely to rally behind me. And so it's just like kind of funny that way. On one hand, like, just please respect my decision. But on the other hand, they were just like more motivated to encourage my goal because I, you know, didn't want to lose, which is kind of funny. But I mean, in the end, I mean, now I'm engaged. I'm not wearing my ring. I didn't put it on today, but it all worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely learned a lot about people. And, you know, sometimes it was a blessing because we would do other things. We would go on ice cream dates or, you know, go to an indoor rock climbing wall or go to a museum, for example. And it didn't have to be so focused on this like one-on-one interview style, which is, if you think about it, it's like every first date. Like, you go to a bar, there's no like real originality there. And so I think that people just kind of become complacent with a first date as, you know, let's get drinks. But, you know, whether you're doing a dry month or a dry life, I mean, there are other people too who don't drink for medical reasons or for mental health or for anything, really. It doesn't have to be, you know, one reason. It can be, you know, a lot of different reasons.
I met my boyfriend. We didn't drink for many, many, many dates. We did other activities and things like that. I think it helps you get to know the person a little bit better. Yeah. For sure. For me, it always helped me spot the people that weren't accepting of me being a little bit different right out of the gate, right? If you can't accept that I don't drink, then how are you going to be accepting of like maybe some other things
1,000%
that I might be a little bit different about, or maybe you're in dating for the wrong reasons, right? It helps kind of point that out real quick.
Yeah.
If
also,
they can't even accept that piece.
Right. Also, if this is a long-term thing, like after maybe 1, 2, 3 dates, like eventually you're going to hang out together and alcohol is not going to be present. Right. So I feel like it's a good opportunity right off the bat to get to know somebody on an even playing field. And I remember, you know, I took a date to a Barry's boot camp class. I love Barry's. I've taken them to core power yoga. I'm like, you're going to work out with me because this is what I enjoy doing on a regular basis. It was interesting to see somebody in that specific, you know, venue and somebody who had never taken, you know, that kind of class, which is pretty challenging, and seeing just like how they deal with it. I wasn't trying to make them uncomfortable, obviously, but kind of, you know, seeing how that they dealt with something new and something different. And so, yeah, I promise I'm not mean. I was just like,
I was gonna say, those poor guys.
I was just trying to get my workout in and a date at the same time.
You know,
I could have taken them grocery shopping, but I thought this was more exciting.
My first date with my boyfriend, we went shopping. He had to get like sweatpants. He's like, do you want to just come along because I have a little bit of time? And I'm like, sure. And that was like our first date, and it was so sweet and so innocent, and you know, I mean, it just is what it is, and I'm totally cool with that.
That's awesome. Does he still have those sweatpants?
He still does.
That's so cute.
Yeah, and I love it. So, I mean, I know what sweatpants they are. To me, it was like more intimate to like go shopping, and like we had talked for a while, and it was like, okay, this is really cool.
Definitely.
I can't stop drinking this because it's so good.
I know.
Yeah.
They have other flavors too. It's great.
I love it. I love it. So when you started like, okay, I write for the New York Times, I write for all these major publications, you know, why do a book about it? What kind of was the transition to wanting to do that?
A few things. I always wanted to write a book. I never thought it was going to be a book about not drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely had like, you know, my heart set on writing a novel, which may still happen in the next couple years, but we'll see. But I was definitely the epitome of those really silly dry January memes where it's like, you have a friend doing dry January and they won't shut up about it. It's me.
That was you.
It's me. It's still me. But instead of, you know, hounding my friends with all these facts and benefits and just chatting about how amazing I feel, I was like, here is the book version. So, I mean, obviously, I still preach about how awesome it is, but I think it's just kind of the more elaborated version of everything in my brain about this specific movement.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Now, when you went and did Dry January, were you like, okay, I'm doing this, now I'm going to write about it at Well Plus Good, like at Well and Good, New York Times? Like, were you writing about it as you were doing it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Nobody knew.
So I had been doing these 30-day challenges, and they were fitness challenges. So I had done one at Barry's Boot Camp. Actually, I don't know if Barry's Boot Camp was before or after this one, but I had done all these fitness challenges. Yeah, Barry's was after. So I had done all these fitness challenges and written about them, and kind of to see like how it would change my body, if I would like lose weight, if I was happier, if I, you know, God forbid, got injured, etc. And I was writing about those, but they were very fitness focused. And then when this happened, I had no intention of writing about it. I always like partake in like really random things, like ran a marathon, like Tough Mudders. Like I will just do things just for like the experience,
right?
And just to be like, okay, like let's see if I like this. Let's see if it sticks. I didn't intend on like writing a piece, and I actually didn't write about my dry January until the following year.
Okay.
And I wrote a beauty article about how it changed my skin. So not really like anything about the mental health benefits or anything else that I had gone through, like dating or hanging out with friends. So it wasn't really until the book that I wrote about everything. And then after that, started writing articles about, you know, one-off experiences or different perspectives regarding not drinking. So, yeah, it was not in the plan. I mean, I used to write about booze. So sometimes, I mean, now it's been, you know, we're going on 8 years, right, of this journey. But the first couple of years, people were like very confused. They knew me to be the person who knew about the newest bars, the newest restaurants, what to order, what the newest launches were. And even today, like sometimes they'll still get emails and people will be like, do you want to cover this vodka launch? And I'm like, thank you for sharing, but like it's not my beat anymore. It's not really my lifestyle either. So it was a 180. And I tell, you know, this story just about kind of almost having like this identity crisis because it was such a huge part of my job.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I was like, oh, now it is no longer.
Now it is no longer.
Yeah.
And now I have to like rethink all of that.
Yeah.
I can imagine that would have been hard. Do you think that the switch for you personally, like what do you think is the biggest aha moment that you've had in your personal journey of doing the 30-day challenges that you would have missed out on?
I mean, there's so many. I think that having just ran the New York City Marathon, there's no way that I would have been able to train like that and recovered and been ready to run more and more every week if I had been drinking during that time. I think that I would not have met my fiance because that's a whole different story, but just kind of the way that life works. And if I had not written this book, I don't think I would have met him, like, period. There's just so many things and like friends and people like that I've met. These relationships just like wouldn't exist. So it's kind of, it's interesting to think about like, what would I be doing? Like, where would I be? Would I still be covering alcohol like in the same way? Because so much has changed. I mean, I think people are so much more aware of the effects of alcohol. And so I don't know. It's like, there's so much. It's like my whole life.
Yeah, has changed. Do you think
has changed?
You know, I look at there's a couple of like really popular TikTokers that I know that all they do is drink.
Yeah.
And all they do is party. And I think back to like what my kids are growing up with and seeing as kind of like the cool people and what they're doing. How do you see that kind of affecting like media and culture from your perspective as a journalist with the sober curious movement? Do you think a lot of people are coming into the sober curious movement because they're seeing that being detrimental to other people, like in the media? I think of like Wendy Williams, like what we're watching with like her documentary and like stuff that's happening with other people, with Chandler from Friends passing away. Like, do you think a lot of people are coming into this movement and being curious about it because of those types of things?
I think that Gen Z, well, I can't speak on behalf of Gen Z because I am a millennial. But Gen Z definitely drinks less than millennials, than Gen X, than generations before. And I think that now we're seeing more options. People are socializing differently. People are definitely more on social media than instead of, you know, making friends at a bar. They're making friends on the internet and meeting their spouses on the internet, etc. I think that also, you know, it used to be reported that a little bit of red wine or one drink was like healthy for you.
Was good for your heart.
And now that has been debunked. So there aren't these excuses of, oh, I'm it's okay, like it's a little bit healthy, you know, that sort of thing. And I just think that there's just so much more information out there.
Yeah.
Alcohol will always exist, and I'm not anti-alcohol. I think that, you know, it's important to obviously like listen to your body, and it's important to give, you know, sober curious times a try. But I also think that, yeah, it's just so hard to ignore everything else that's going on.
You know, it's interesting. My son, like I said, he's almost 19. You know, in high school, he was like one of the cool kids. So like the cool kids when I was in high school, we were like going to the airport parking lot and like having keggers in the middle of the woods. That's what we were doing, right? They are different. They are, I mean, some of them are still doing that, right? But my son has had the same girlfriend for 4 years, and they go to the library.
Ooh.
And they go to Barnes & Noble and have coffee dates.
Yeah.
It's different. Like they're reading, and they seem to have really kind of watched the generation before them and are very aware to like not do the things that, you know, the millennials have done with like college loan debt. They just seem to be, their heads seem to be a little bit clearer.
Yeah. Well, I also think, again, I'm not in high school, so I can't speak to this, but I think now more than ever, it's cool to be kind. It's cool to be aware. It's cool to have opinions about politics. Whereas when I was in high school, I think it was just a little bit different. I mean, when I was in high school, Mean Girls was, you know, premiering.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, relatable in some ways, right?
Yep.
So, I don't know, maybe that's the truth now, but from what I've seen, even, you know, as I've kind of evolved within my career, I think people are a lot more kind and like forgiving and
open-minded.
You know, open-minded for sure.
Yep.
And so I think that will continue.
I 100% agree with that. And having two kids, you know, he just graduated high school and having another high schooler right now, they're just a lot more open. I mean, there's definitely mean people still out there.
Oh, absolutely.
But
always.
As a generation, I feel like they have become a lot more open-minded to a lot of different things, whether it's being sober curious, whether it's being open to somebody else's gender or whatever it is, they're a lot more open-minded.
Definitely.
You know? Who are some of the people that came alongside you in this journey, and did you lose friends over it?
Yeah.
I know that like my friendships changed when I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
Because like you're not going out to the bar with them anymore, so
I definitely...
If you don't have real friends,
yeah,
you don't hang out with them. You know what I mean?
It's funny. I think especially that first year, a lot of my friends were questioning why I was doing it. They wanted to know what the point was, if I was going to drink on February 1st again. They asked, you know, just why don't you just have one drink? It's fine, you know, that sort of thing. And I think for them, it was more out of curiosity. I don't necessarily think it was mean-spirited,
right.
But I feel like a lot of those friends now come to me with their ideas for like, oh, like let's go to this bar that serves non-alcoholic XYZ. Or, you know, a couple years ago, they're like, I'm interested in doing a dry January. And it obviously was a complete 180 from their first messages to me. But I think for the most part, you know, the people who were supportive and have been supportive have stuck around. And obviously, you know, when you attend the same events and you go to the same bars, you're going to see the same people. And maybe that is your meeting place and also the basis of your friendship. And so sometimes that kind of fades away. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, even friends grow apart sometimes. But yeah, I definitely saw less of some people. But again, like that first year, I would still go out to the bar and I would, you know, order a Diet Coke, or I'd order something, or I'd, you know, whisper to the bartender, can you make me XYZ? And so.
What's your favorite sober cocktail?
It's so funny because I
think that's a lot of people's fears. Like, what do I even order? Like, I don't want to just have a soda. Like, I want to have it in like a fancy glass with like, look pretty, so I look like I'm drinking like everybody else.
Of course. There are a few that I love. There's actually a few cocktails that are non-alcoholic on the menu at this bar called Unlisted. It's on the Lower East Side, and they have Fluair cocktails and they have Free Spirits cocktails, and they're delicious. I mean, their beverage director is like top notch. But I would say it's hard to choose one. I think also the ingredients really matter. Yeah. So if I'm, you know, making a non-alcoholic cocktail at home, I usually use this brand called Twisted Alchemy. They make cold pressed juices. And they have so many good ones. They have like a watermelon one. They have a 3 citrus. So you can, you know, recreate margaritas, and they're delicious. And they also are in like, you know, different bars and restaurants throughout the United States. So.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think one of the fears that people have is that, but also being like mocked and left out. But I saw, you know, the non-alcoholic White Claw, and I'm like, normal White Claw doesn't even taste good. So like so many of these brands are jumping on the bandwagon. Yeah. Right? They are understanding that the sober curious movement isn't going away. So you can even go to a bar and get non-alcoholic beer or non-alcoholic White Claw. My dad always drank O'Doul's growing up because he didn't drink. Yeah. And so I remember that very distinctly. Like, we didn't have any alcohol in our house because my brother obviously was an addict, but he always had O'Doul's growing up. So I was very familiar with like non-alcoholic, but there's so many options. So many options right now.
And to your point, I think a lot of these really big brands are realizing that they are missing out on market share. Like, they really want to be part of the movement as well. Yeah. So big brands like Diageo and Freshenet Mianetto, and there's just so many. And they're not just making their own like zero proof versions, but they're also buying those brands too. Yep. And bringing them in-house. It's going to be interesting to see how things shake out in the next couple of years. But yeah, every day there's like a new launch. Every day I get an email that's like a new wine, a new beer, a new spirit, a new canned cocktail. And I'm like, oh my God, my head's going to explode. Yeah. I don't have room in my like refrigerator or my pantry for all of these things.
Right. So you must get just so many pitches now because of your book. Like, everybody's like, here, I want you to cover my cocktail now.
And that's the thing, though, is that I don't write about brands. I don't write about brands because I will work with them and partner with them for events. Right. And so I never want there to be a conflict of interest.
I mean, that makes sense because, you know, when we're thinking about brand deals and things like that, it makes more sense to work with them maybe on a social media influencer brand deal or an event deal or something like that. When you're working with, as a journalist, it can be looked at as favoritism. Exactly. Right? When you're being worked at as a journalist, and a lot of brands might not understand that.
Right. And also it's just a conflict of interest. It would be strange to promote the rival of a brand that I'm working with too. So I'm like, no brands.
I love that. I love this part of your book too, where you have the contract.
Oh yeah.
Because when you set the accountability piece of it, is there a place where people can fill this out like online, or is it only in the book?
No, it's only in the book.
Well, that's okay. People can buy the book and then they can fill it out on here, and then they can make sure that they prop it up on their table every day and see, you know.
What they've committed to.
Yeah. Overall, my stomach feels blank after eating a meal. A less than impressive thing I did, you know, was probably blank. This is after you drank, right?
Yeah.
my recreational drinking and non-drinking activities usually include blank, blank, and blank, which make me feel blank. I love this. My skin can be described at blank. Overall, my attitude towards drinking is blank. So I love that. And you have them circle like what the actual date of their challenge is.
Yeah.
Which I absolutely love. I mean, there's so much I wish I could show people. They're just going to have to buy the book, but the beauty inside of it, right? And how pretty the book is too.
It's very colorful.
It's very, very colorful. I love it. So what's next for you? Because you have a lot going for you with your journalism. And I mean, first of all, before we started filming too, the amount of press that you got for your book is very, very impressive. I mean, Tamron Hall, Good Morning America. I mean, you've done such amazing stuff.
Thanks.
As a publicist, I'm like, did you do that all yourself?
I did.
Yeah, like congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a lot of work. I did a lot of my own PR when I had my personal finance company.
Yeah.
I got on Dr. Oz by myself. I got on Fox and Friends and got a regular spot there by myself. And it's a lot of hustle.
It is.
It's exhausting.
And I think it really goes to show like how hard publicists work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you see brands on TV a lot of the time, you're like, wow, that's cool. But like they just showed up that day and, did a segment. And the reality is that is not true. It came from a pitch idea most of the time. I mean, sometimes, yes, producers will call you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very thankful for that.
Yes.
But a lot of the time, it is about building relationships. It's about really presenting your story in a unique way and really voicing what point of differentiation that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for so many people, they have, wonderful ideas, but it has to be like presented in a very specific fashion. And so, yeah, I have a lot of respect for publicists because it's not easy.
It's not easy. You were saying you have like 7,000 pitches out, and it's like, yeah, like in order to secure a national segment, I mean, there's thousands of pitches that go out for one segment a lot of times. That is hard. So what do you think it was your differentiating thing that kind of made that stick for you?
I think that for me, I mean, the dry challenge was definitely like a first of its kind.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had that definitely working for me. But I think also just relating so much of the content in the book to real life was so important. And having tips that were relatable.
Yes.
So I think that was a big one too.
Oh, 100%. Can people still sign up for the dry challenge?
Yeah. I mean, you can start your dry challenge anytime. You can start it today, tomorrow, January 1st if you want to.
Yeah.
I think that there's no wrong time to give alcohol a break.
I agree. Okay, so what's next for you? Because I know you're doing something really cool right now that I want to talk about.
I have this platform now called goingdry.co, and it is private events. It is public events. I actually have an event at Barry's Boot Camp tomorrow night.
Yay.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, if you're in town, you should definitely come.
I would have loved to.
But it's really about showcasing that you can be social and also network and, just have a fun time without alcohol. So we typically have activities followed by non-alcoholic happy hours. So tomorrow we'll be serving some Celsius, which I'm obsessed with.
Yes.
And Good Time Brewing, which is a local beer brand that is non-alcoholic in New York. We're going to serve their IPAs. And yeah, I have a few collaborations coming up and some other big announcements that I can't talk about yet.
Oh, no.
I know. I hate being that person. Sorry to keep secrets.
That's okay.
But yeah, a lot of fun stuff coming down the pipeline.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Well, and you've done so much amazing stuff already and definitely have inspired me again to revisit those alcohol-free months. We have a couple health and wellness experts that are covering like the Wegovy, Ozempic stuff going on. And there's been a lot of research on that treating alcohol abuse as well. It's been interesting to see that dynamic as well. But for you, I think specifically with the Sober Curious movement, pointing out that this is not for people that have alcoholism, right?
Correct.
That are like, oh, well, I'll just do like a month of... if you have like alcoholism, you need to go to rehab and like get the help that you need. But for you to have this sober curious movement and to give yourself this gift of a clear head, a clear mind, clear thinking, and
less anxiety.
Yes. And to be able to wake up refreshed.
Yeah.
That to me is always like the kicker. Like, I can wake up and feel amazing every day.
Absolutely.
And that's a gift to myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've also been talking a lot lately about this trend called dry tripping, which is essentially traveling without alcohol.
Yeah.
And I am so in favor of this because when you're on vacation and you are just trying to relax, the last thing that you want to do is wake up hungover or, you know, just anxious. And there's so much to enjoy when you can like just roll out of bed and feel refreshed
And amazing.
Yeah. So
I love that.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much.
There's so much.
There's so much good.
Well, where can people find you, get your book, and follow along in your journey and get these like announcements that you've dropped? We all want to hear.
You can follow me on Instagram at Hillary with one L, Hillary, writes NY, and also goingdry.co, both the website and the Instagram. And you can find the book at Target and Barnes & Noble, Strand Bookstore in New York, and Amazon. And I think that's about it.
That's it?
Yeah.
This has been awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much for the drink.
Oh, enjoy. I'm glad you like it.
I love it. I love it. And they have more of these types, right?
Yeah. Fleur has a gin, a spiced cane, which is like a rum substitute. They have a mezcal substitute and some other really cool flavors.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
This is awesome. And best of luck with your next challenge. Are you doing Sober October?
Absolutely. Every year.
Every year.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to join you this year.
Great.
Yeah, I'll join you. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.